Welcome in this special Thursday edition of Portal Talk. Texas is all in on the portal in 2026. CJ and I are going to break down what Sark had to say, the positions he mentioned, and how big this is headed into the spring and next year. All right, CJ, we're going to start by taking a listen at what Steve Sarkisian had to say yesterday at the signing day press conference.
Offensive line is something that we're going to address in the portal. An interior defensive lineman is something we'll address in the portal, potentially a linebacker, potentially something in the secondary, potentially a running back. I mean, so there's needs there that we're going to address. But again, do they fit us? Do they fit us physically and in the style in which we want to play? Do they fit us culturally from a character standpoint? And that's the homework that we need to do to get that done. And so that, again, the transfer portal is great. And like I said, it fills needs for us. But at the end of the day, when you really look at us year in and year out, the bulk of what we do is in high school recruiting. And like going into this year, we were one of the younger football teams in the country. We knew that going into the season. We knew there was going to be growing pains. And going into next year, I think we're going to reap the benefits of that. We had a lot of young players, first and second year players play for us this year that are going to be a lot better players next year. So we're going to grow up again and we'll become a veteran football team again. You're just going to have years like this when maybe you're a little bit younger, and that's okay.
Sark mentioned offensive line multiple times.
Yeah.
First time he's really come out publicly and addressed the needs in the portal. As expected. You wait until the high school class signs, right? But what was your takeaway? I mean, there was a lot of OL talk from Steve Sarkisian yesterday in the portal.
Yeah, I think it was the openness of needing offensive linemen, right? We've seen only one portal visitor from the offensive line before. That was last year. Obviously did not end up at Texas. And you start looking ahead to what needs to be corrected in 2026. And, it goes no further than the big boys up front, right? In the pancake factory. Well, those pancakes are going to have to go to someone else's plate before they then bring it over to your table, right? And that's exactly what I think Steve Sarkisian's looking at right now. And, the number of offensive linemen, I think, is the big thing for me. And he mentioned later on about the possibility of a Connor Robertson returning or declaring or portaling, right? He said, look, we're going to sit down and have conversations with everybody. But right now, Texas knows that they have to go to the portal for the first time on the offensive line, and they know that they cannot miss knowing what this season looked like, Gerry.
And I think we're talking about interior. I think tackles with Trevor Gooseby, assuming he comes back, and Brandon Baker's a second-year starter. Tackles are pretty secure. That doesn't mean Nick Brooks won't be tasked with competing with Brandon Baker and pushing him. We're not saying that. Brooks could also play guard. But I think we're really talking about guard, center, guard here. We'll see what Connor Robertson does at center. But really, I'm kind of zeroed in on left guard and right guard in the portal, and depending on how that conversation goes with Connor Robertson, potentially center as well. I'll remind people, Texas likes their young freshman offensive linemen, but generally, and that's Devin Coleman, that's Jordan Coleman, and that's Jackson Christian, and that's Nick Brooks. But generally, you would like for those guys to develop for 2 years, start to play some snaps when that time is right, is headed into year 2. Not Nick Brooks necessarily, but the Colemans, and Jackson Christian, and then really challenge for a starting spot going into year 3 of the program. But Texas can't put themselves in that position to where those guys are actually challenging for starting spots next year, I think, in 26 season. So I'm really looking at left guard, right guard. We'll see what happens at center. All right, next position, CJ, is defensive line. And I think that's pretty clear it's an over-the-ball player because they lose Travis Shaw and Cole Brevard. But that might not be the only position on the defensive line. It could be a pass rusher at edge, but I think over the ball for sure. But if there's a pass rusher at edge out there, I think that's on the table too.
Yeah, look, I didn't think that they necessarily needed an edge rusher last year, and they still brought in David Bailey, right? And Sark kind of talked about it in the sense of you have your absolute needs, you have some luxuries, and then you have guys where if you have spots and you have, late in the cycle and you still have a spot to have them, hey, we'll take them, right? If it fits what they want to do. So they put them into 3 different categories. Look, defensive line for me in the over the ball spot, Gerry, it's a very important spot. And we saw how important a Cole Brevard was, as Travis Shaw was, even if there were only about 20 to 30 snaps per game between the two. Texas will be getting older in that room, right? They won't have to go out and get 5 or 6 guys at that spot this year. But to have some experience, to have some production coming from the middle of your defensive line, boy, is that important. I think Texas goes out there, and I think they go big game hunting, knowing that they don't need to get the bigger number this year at the defensive line.
And what could be coming back on the defensive line on the interior next season? Of course, those conversations have to happen. It all has to make sense from an NIL perspective. Alex January, year 3. Murad Watson, year 3, was dinged up quite a bit second half of the season. The Texas loves their young guys on the defensive line. Those guys, Justice Terry will probably be a 290-pound player that plays more inside next year. They love Josiah Sharma as an over-the-ball player. Got to get more consistent as a young player. Myron Charles really came on during the season as well. And then there's a couple other guys that could come back. We'll have to see how that goes, right? But this is not, to your point, CJ, Texas is in a much different spot heading into 26 on the interior D-line than they were heading into 25 when they needed a number of bodies to rotate in and out of there. That need for the over-the-ball player is there coming in. Obviously, James Johnson, Jamarian Carlton probably need some time to develop. So I think with Alex January back, Murad Watson, if those guys are both back, to go with Myron Charles, to go with Josiah Sharma, to go with Justice Terry, who'll be, I think, a difference maker next year.
Yes.
Depending on who else they bring back. They start in a much better place this year. So over the ball, for sure. At edge, the reason I threw out pass rusher at edge is, look, I mean, Colin Simmons, maybe the best in America, come back. Lance Jackson, obviously. Colton Vosick still never had a fully healthy season. He was dinged up again this year. So at some point, Smith Orogbo's shown some flashes, but he's still an inexperienced player. Brad Spence played off the edge. And conceivably, he should have a really good final season also, assuming he comes back. We can't say for sure all these guys are coming back, but there's still that need. And I think Richard Wesley's going to play early behind Lance Jackson. I think that will happen. But there's still that additional pass rusher. If they find somebody that fits that role, and it could be maybe a 5-tech type that can play in NASCAR packages, an interior pass rusher too. But I think if there's that pass rusher that makes sense, we could see that. All right, CJ, moving on the linebacker before you tell everybody about advanced pain care. Linebacker was mentioned, and some people might be like, hold on, why is linebacker mentioned? Well, Anthony Hill's probably going pro. Anthony Smith, I think, is a future NFL player. Leon Gulafau should be back one more year. Bo Barnes, Texas really likes. Brad Spence, unless he moves to linebackers, more in the edge mold. Jonathan Cunningham needs time to put on weight. They have Tyler Atkinson will play next year as a freshman. We'll see on Rocky Cummings. Kosi Okpala probably needs some time. But CJ, mentioning linebacker, does that make sense to you to grab an experienced college football Power 4 level linebacker?
Yeah, I think so. And I say this in the sense that you don't need a star at linebacker.
Yeah.
You just need a body that helps with the depth, right? This isn't a guy where I think Texas will break the bank, not at the linebacking spot, because, hey, Tyler Atkinson is a guy that, the sky's the limit for in the middle of your defense, and you expect him to be a 3-and-out guy as well. You'd like to get him on the field as quickly as possible, but as we talk about that, we've seen it time and time again. It takes time for your middle of the defense linebacker to get on the field, right? It wasn't until really the middle of the season, Anthony Hill's freshman year, that we really started to see him consistently, right? They had the little packages. He was rushing the passer mostly against Alabama early in that season, but it takes some time for game planning, situational awareness of what the game entails before you're truly comfortable throwing your middle of the defense, captain over to a true freshman. Now, I do think Texas is in a solid spot right now, right? You mentioned the possibility of a Trey Moore returning, right? Of course, Leon Gulafau, Anthony Smith. Texas did great job against Texas A&M with the two of them on the field together. Still not the biggest, right? You're probably lacking a little bit of size there in comparison to what you had with Anthony Hill. But hey, the one thing that I look at is if you could go get a guy, Gerry, who's played meaningful snaps elsewhere and just kind of throw him in what we saw as kind of a David Benda role, just to kind of bridge that gap until you're truly ready to throw Tyler Atkinson to the Wolves in the SEC, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Before we get to the last 3 spots, running back, secondary, and specialist. Second here for Advanced Pain Care, our sponsor of today's show.
Pros know the pain stops here.
Physical therapy helps me as an athlete then and now. And do I still need therapy? Yes. Advanced Pain Care helps with that.
Injuries will stack up. They'll add up. You can't let those injuries get you down, and Advanced Pain Care has been very helpful for me.
We can help with whatever's got you down, from nerve damage to our spinal cord stimulator. Pain is inevitable. Suffering is optional. Same-day appointments available.
Advanced Pain Care. The pain stops here.
The pain will stop here with the portal, CJ. Easy lead in after. Yay. All right. So running back was interesting to me.
Yeah.
Sarks has subtle messages. Like sometimes you say, hey, this Anthony Smith guy is a future star. He gives hints. Him saying running back yesterday can only mean one thing to me. Somebody's leaving this program, or more than the two who've already left. Because if you were thinking about you weren't going to have a loss, Trey Wisner is coming back, Cedric Baxter's coming back, Christian Clark's coming back, James Simon is back, and then you had two freshman signees, you're 6 at the running back. You don't really carry more than that. Right. So I think there was some subtle messaging there that they think they're going to have a need, which means at least one guy's going to leave this program that's in it currently.
Yeah, I think so. And that's just the simple math right now. Yep. You're sitting at 4, right? Considering CJ Baxter could return, Trey Wisner, Christian Clark, James Simon. That's kind of your 4 at the moment. You add 2, you're at 6. Gerry, you want to be at 6 at the running back spot. Well, according to Sark and mentioning the running back spot, someone of that previous 4, not including Jet Walker and Derek Cooper, obviously, is likely to depart. Now, who will it be? Where will they go? Will it be to the pros? Will it be to the draft or to the portal? We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. But ultimately, Texas mentioning running back as a possibility out of the portal, that's going to be really telling here in a little bit. But Gerry, it's interesting where they will go, who they could target at the running back spot. You bring in 2 guys that are 6'1", 6'1.5", 215, will eventually get up to 220 pounds. Do you go back to that mold? Because obviously running between the tackles, short distance wasn't a strength the last 2 years. Do you do that knowing that your 2 freshmen bring that type of skill set, especially with Derek Cooper? Or do you go kind of that scat back, out in the flare to kind of fill a role if Ryan Niblett ends up declaring for the NFL draft? That's going to be interesting too. So Texas mentioning their running back spot, that lit up some lights in my head saying, okay, be aware here because they could go one of any direction.
And obviously the theme of this show is Texas is all in on the portal in 26. That is a clear sign to me. All right, secondary, CJ, I think is very interesting because I think there's a need, multiple positions for Texas in the secondary. But where they go, I think it's going to be telling on their thoughts about where Grayson Littleton plays as a sophomore. If they don't take a corner in the portal, that's kind of hinting that Grayson Littleton may be a corner next year, because obviously be a starter opposite what I think will be Cade Phillips. We can believe Manny Muhammad's going pro, right? That's the plan. So kind of your thoughts on secondary, because Jonah Williams will be out another spring practice. He'll be in baseball. It's hard to fully count on a guy who misses spring practice every year he's in Austin. That sets back his development. Yeah,
it sure does. And look, while unfortunate, it's rare to see a 2-sport star, so I'm not blaming Jonah at any instance here. I think that's spectacular. But when he said secondary, my brain instantly went to safety. Because how could it not? You won't have Jonah for the spring, Michael Taft, probably Jelani McDonald off to the NFL draft, considering the year that he had. Now, if Texas is able to lure Jelani back for a senior year, that's massive. Does that mean that you're out of the blue when it comes to the safety spot? Maybe, maybe not. It again comes down to Xavier Phil-Sami and Jonah and Zealous Hicks that you really have to figure out a true solution with. But point being, secondary in general, and to add to your point, Gerry, about Grayson Littleton, it's going to be really interesting because who do you trust then at the slot? Who do you trust in a very, very important position in your defense, knowing what we've seen over the last few years with that spot producing the way that it has? Is that going to be someone that Texas continues to keep, like a Warren Roberson or a Wardell Mack? We'll see. Or do they go fill a spot out of the portal to help with that nickel spot? That's going to be telling. But it could go one of 3 directions, and really any of the directions in the secondary. And it wouldn't surprise me ultimately if they took multiple secondary members.
Yeah, I agree. Because if they take a nickel, that means they think Grayson Littleton's going to be a corner. If they take a corner, then that leaves the possibility open that Littleton remains at nickel. And I totally agree. It's safety. All right, last thing we're going to hit on is the specialist. And that doesn't mean this is all the positions. We do think wide receiver in the portal is still a strong possibility. So we want to mention that. Sark just didn't mention that yesterday. But so specialist he did mention. I think they're going to go kicker again in the portal. That doesn't mean they don't like Jake Collette, but a year in college helps a young kicker. Punter will be interesting. I think Bukowskis is really, really talented, but what do you see there from a specialist standpoint? And specialist could also mean return man as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah,
So,
definitely. Again, because we mentioned, hey, you just don't know if Ryan Niblett is going to use what was an All-American level season as a return man to, kind of parlay that into his NFL draft stock. So that's going to be something to certainly monitor. Specialist to me, punter and kicker.
Yeah.
And I've been of this thought process for a while. I don't like having true freshmen kicking at any point in my game, especially in the SEC. When you look at next year's schedule, you go into Death Valley, you go to Neyland, you go to Kyle Field. Oh, and you have Ohio State very early on. I know it's at home, but that's a big game again that won't be canceled, right? So to me, if you can go get a bridge gap guy to build on the freshman behind the scenes, I think that's fantastic. Texas did exactly that this year. The problem is they didn't have any freshmen waiting in the fold, right? So I know that gets expensive to go find an all-conference kicker and punter. But if we're talking about going all in, well, you tell me, Gerry, if you can flip the field or put points on the board from distances that you normally would not have been able to, I think that's worth it.
Yeah, I mean, Boomeister out of the portal was a huge addition. He may be a drafted punter. He'll definitely be in a free agent camp. Mason Shipley had a really strong year, especially from the right hash, by the way. So I totally agree with CJ on that. All right, guys, that'll do it for this little special Thursday portal talk. Texas is all in on the portal ahead of the 26th season, as they should be. We'll have more on this in the future. Texas will start having players that declare that they're going to go to the portal. Guys will start jumping in the portal that are going to be of interest, or say announce they're going to the portal that'll be of interest to Texas. We'll be following this all of December and through the portal window in January. So thanks for joining in, as always, to On Texas Football. Thanks for the continued support of OTF. We're happy to have you guys in the community, and we'll talk to you soon.
Welcome.